what could be behind this epidemic of gun violence in America? That's going to be our topic for today. I do want to say I am going to try to do a live stream this coming week, and I will aim to do it on Thursday. However, lately it's been pretty busy. Haven't been able to do as many live streams as I've wanted. Nevertheless, please like, share, and subscribe on all of the platforms, and I will show you real quick. I am on all of these: Odyssey, Rumble, BitChute, YouTube, Podbean, Gab, Mind, Substack, Telegram, and Getter, and I'll repeat that at the end. We have the subway shooting suspect. He was arrested Wednesday. His weapon apparently was a Glock 9mm handgun. Not sure which one it is. Some of them, they have varying capacities. It left 10 people shot. My understanding is that there were, I think, another 10 people that were injured for other reasons. Federal investigators determined the gun used in the shooting was purchased by James at a pawn shop, a licensed firearms dealer in the Columbus, Ohio area in 2011, said a law enforcement official who wasn't authorized to discuss the investigation and spoke on condition of anonymity. So, 11 years this weapon has been out in circulation, and by circulation I mean we don't know whether it's been in one hand or another. What this would suggest is that he filled out a form at the pawn shop and he purchased it himself. It's also possible, and this is just my speculation, that the last known person to purchase this weapon purchased it from that pawn shop, and it was somebody besides this guy. But yeah, it's definitely possible that at the time he was legally allowed to own this weapon. We do know, however, that in 2019, up until 2019, he'd been monitored by the FBI for various reasons. And recently, he had taken to social media and made threatening posts about the mayor of New York, Eric Adams. The gunman sent off smoke grenades in a crowded subway car and then fired at least 33 shots with the 90mm handgun, police said. 5 gunshot victims were in critical condition, but all 10 wounded in the shooting were expected to survive. At least a dozen others who escaped gunshot wounds were treated for smoke inhalation and other injuries. Investigators believe the weapon jammed, preventing the suspect from continuing to fire, the official said. They also said he has ties to Ohio, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, and Wisconsin. So my understanding is that he was a little bit of a drifter and had a number of mental health issues. He was also very much into some religious fanaticism, which I'll also get into some similar cases in the past. Authorities were examining social media videos in which the 62-year-old decried the United States as a racist place awash in violence and sometimes railed against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Rambling, profanity-filled YouTube videos apparently posted by James, who is black, are replete with violent language and bigoted comments, some against other black people. So what they're referring to is that he uses the N-word a lot. And that is, I think, one of the funniest ways that the media distorts the news. If you listen to what this guy was saying, he was not saying derogatory things about black people as such. Apparently, he was making rants about things like now confirmed Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson being married to a white man. So that has nothing to do with any animus he has towards other black people. It has to do with his racial views of other races and what he thinks of them as a threat to black people. And this is not an isolated incident. What I think is going to be interesting is whether we get more details on the purchase of this weapon. And if you watched my previous video from last week about the Sacramento shooter and the auto sear that he used, will we ever find out if this guy had an auto sear and was basically using this as an automatic weapon, which would have affected the accuracy of his aim? This is a different incident that happened over the last weekend, one that didn't really receive much national news. Man charged with second-degree murder for Taboo nightclub shooting. So this guy, his name was Timothy Liddell Rush. Now this was not a mass shooter. This was a guy who apparently had a target and may have actually killed her. Police say that 32-year-old Timothy Liddell Rush is currently in custody at the Lynn County Jail. Earlier on Monday, police identified the two people killed as 25-year-old Michael Valentine and 35-year-old Nicole Owens, both of Cedar Rapids. 10 other people were injured in the shooting, with at least one in critical condition. Along with second-degree murder, Rush is charged with willful injury, causing serious injury, intimidation with a dangerous weapon, and reckless use of a firearm causing serious injury. Police have said that they believe there may have been multiple shooters and that it was a targeted incident. So, my understanding also was, and this was from a different article, didn't have it handy, but he may have been a former employee of the nightclub. And this would put him, in some sense, in the same category as the shooter from Sacramento. A person who was headed to a nightlife spot and was intending to, or maybe he didn't even intend it to begin with, but he was armed and ready to kill somebody that he was hostile to begin with. And this wasn't some sort of, planned mass casualty event where he wanted to get the attention of the country or to kill random people. These are not random acts of violence. These are acts of, concentrated grudge settling by people who are already dangerous within their community and may already be known to be dangerous. Another issue that happened not long ago in the city of Cleveland was a woman killed a man who was apparently the father of her child in on the grounds of Metro Health Hospital. So Metro Health Hospital is a publicly owned hospital. It's usually one of the more poorly, I guess, outfitted hospitals in the city. But this has very little to do with the hospital itself. It says no charges have been filed against a 22-year-old woman who surrendered to police in connection with a fatal shooting Tuesday at Metro Health. Rayshawn Calloway, age 25, of Cleveland, was dead in the passenger side of a Toyota RAV4 about 1:40 p.m. near Metro Health Drive and Scranton Avenue, according to police and the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office. Calloway suffered a gunshot wound to the head. Calloway was pronounced dead at the scene, police said. And so later it goes on to say that he may have actually threatened to kill her, which would have maybe caused her to shoot him as a preemptive attack. This would be, if the media covers it fairly, a very interesting legal case about self-defense. Will she be able to beat a charge if she's charged with any murder or manslaughter based on the fact that he had threatened to murder her? I think that it would be a fascinating case. I don't know if it will ever go to trial. The police might actually opt, or I think the prosecution, the district attorney here may actually decide, well, we're not going to charge her because there was reason to believe that she was acting in self-defense. But we'll see. Straw purchases, I think, are an important issue that people are going to have to deal with. I don't know what the answer is. If you, for example, want somebody to buy you some lemon juice at the store, you hand them the money, they go into the store, they buy it for you, there's no problem. It's much different with firearms because, of course, you're talking about something that this person may be prohibited from having. A Norristown man, so Norristown is in western Pennsylvania, or eastern Pennsylvania, I should say. A Norristown man is admitted to illegally transferring a handgun to another borough man who then allegedly used the weapon to fatally shoot a third man in the borough. Sincere Burnett, age 22, address is here, pleaded guilty in Montgomery County Court to charges of unlawful transfer of a firearm to an ineligible person, making false statements, and carrying a firearm without a license in connection with a straw purchase activity involving a gun allegedly used by Hilton Freeman Jr. to kill Junior Pinnock on April 25th, 2021 in Norristown. Under questioning by defense lawyer John McMahon Jr., Burnett acknowledged that he could be called to testify against Freeman, who faces a trial in May. So these, I think, are the small fish in the criminal underworld of any community. They're people who they probably accepted a fee, or they did so under intimidation, and maybe because they really needed the money in order to buy a weapon and supply it to a person who could not purchase it. And ultimately, a person was killed using that weapon, and it's something that I think is probably pretty common, and I've read other articles about this, and I have a couple lined up here. And usually these people try to say, well, I didn't know that this guy wasn't allowed to buy a firearm. I didn't know anything about their intention or anything. This is something that I think they should drill into people from a young age, no matter where you live, but especially in areas like this. You shouldn't buy a weapon for somebody who can't buy it themselves, or anybody who's asking you to. It says the investigation began 9:08 p.m. April 25th of last year when Norristown police responded to the intersection of Barbados and Ann Streets for a report of a male being shot at the location. Arriving officers found Pinnock at the corner suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. Pinnock was transported to Suburban Community Hospital where he was pronounced dead. An autopsy determined Pinnock died of multiple gunshot wounds, and the matter of death was ruled homicide. Investigators found 4 fired 9mm caliber cartridge casings at the scene. On May 24th, detectives discovered the firearm used in the shooting in a National Recreation Area Park and discovered the firearm, a Sarsılmaz 9mm semi-automatic pistol. I think that's a Turkish type of weapon, or Turkish manufactured weapon, was purchased by Burnett on March 22nd, 2021 at a local gun store, according to the arrest affidavit. Authorities alleged Burnett lied on record of sale documents when he claimed he purchased the firearm for himself and not another individual, specifically Freeman. The 9mm firearm allegedly used in the murder was purchased under the direction of Freeman, who was not legally allowed to purchase, possess, use, sell, or transfer a firearm, prosecutors alleged. The legally purchased firearm was then used by Freeman in the murder of Pinnock 34 days after the straw purchase, according to court papers. At the time of this illegal purchase, Burnett believed Freeman was legally unable to purchase a firearm. After the purchase, Burnett illegally transferred the firearm to Freeman. County Detective James Carbo alleged in the criminal complaint against Burnett, due to the recovery of the firearm, identified as used in a violent crime and not reported stolen, I believe the firearm was a straw purchase. A straw purchase occurred, so then they go into what that is. A second man also faces charges in connection with his alleged role in the altercation that led to Pinnock's death. Montez Kent, age 29, is awaiting a May trial on homicide charges as well as charges of conspiracy and possessing an instrument of crime, specifically a knife, according to court records. So then they go into some other specifics of the case. There's another case. For some reason, a lot of these happen in Pennsylvania. Must be Steelers fans. But trio was charged in straw purchases of same gun, later reported stolen. My understanding of this case, so this was a grandfather and his grandson and a woman, was that they attempted to sell this firearm and then basically transferred it back and forth between them, and eventually the ATF ran afoul of it. It's kind of a poorly written story, but ultimately it says the older Paxton told police he paid rough $450 for the gun and gave it to his grandson, all the while knowing the younger Paxton has a substance abuse issue and was not legally permitted to possess a firearm because of the prior involuntary commitment. So originally this weapon was owned by this woman who was not related to them. They basically, the grandfather and the grandson went and bought it from her in the grandfather's name. He gave it to his grandson, and then he later attempted to sell the gun in Wyoming. And they were like, well, how exactly did you come into possession of this? And now he could be facing a very long time in the slammer. and his grandfather and the lady too. There's another one also from Pennsylvania. Burke's 18-year-old accused of making straw purchase of AK-47 for 17-year-old. Long story short, this was a person who bought an AK-47 rifle and then came back the next day with a straw buyer. He was a straw buyer, and the real buyer was in the vehicle that had brought him to the site. And the real buyer was dumb enough to be there with a full magazine of hollow point ammunition. And God knows what this guy would have done with it, because he was with a school. He was with a school bag. He was 17 years old. Okay, and I will say, often I'll criticize law enforcement, the federal government, the ATF, but certainly this guy did everything in his power to get arrested. Both of these guys, the older kid and the 17-year-old, and whoever else was with them. These are things that are a menace to people who do need these weapons for self-defense or for, especially in the rural areas, right? So obviously there's people, I think, who can own a weapon just like any other tool responsibly. And then there's other people who are out to use them for basically their own, for score settling or other illegal activities. And those are not compatible reasons for owning a firearm, okay? The one cancels out the other. If you are using it to defend your property, using it for hunting, using it for just exercising your right to own one, you cannot have any. There's no overlap between that and people who are using it in order to harm others or to commit crimes or any other reason that you would own a weapon. And I think that it is good that once in a while some of these people do get arrested for making straw purchases. It's a real problem. I don't know what the answer is. I think the real answer, if in all honesty, is that people grow a brain and don't do it. But there are obviously cases where this has led to the murder of somebody. The weapon purchased in Sacramento and used to commit a murder, I'm not sure that was purchased legally. It may have been a straw purchase as well. And it's not really being talked about either. Another case, okay, this is similar to the Tennessee case, I think, that I may have talked about in a previous video. If not, then it's one that happened not long ago. A guy who was purchasing weapons or I think it was two soldiers who were buying weapons in Tennessee and sending them up to Chicago to be used in gang warfare. And this happened in South Carolina. South Carolina man is among 14 people indicted for allegedly trafficking hundreds of firearms into Philadelphia through what is being referred to as the Iron Pipeline. This was very recently revealed, but I think this was, these guys were all arrested, these guys and gals, because I think there's a lady here, Breonna Walker. Anyway, so these people were arrested last year, but the case is coming to trial soon. U.S. Attorney Jennifer Williams and ATF Philadelphia Field Division Special Agent in charge Matt Verisco announced federal charges in two separate interstate firearm trafficking cases on Monday. In the first case, captioned United States versus Norman et al., 11 people have been charged by indictment with conspiracy to deal firearms without a license and to make a false statement to a federally licensed firearms dealer. So you have their names. They're mostly from the Philadelphia area as well as Atlanta and I don't know where Villa Rica is in Georgia. But you can see it's mostly in those two urban areas. Additionally, Edwin Burgos and Kenneth Burgos were each charged with dealing firearms without a license. So these were two defendants in there. And this may very well have been gang-related. In the second case, captioned U.S. versus Ware et al., 3 people have been charged by indictment with conspiracy to deal firearms without a license and to make a false statement to a federally licensed firearms dealer. So these are the straw purchasers, and their names are now known to anyone who wants to know. And when they get out of prison, they won't be able to buy a weapon either. So they've needlessly screwed themselves. They're all in their 20s, and they'll never be able to buy one without a license, as far as I can see. Beginning in October 2020, ATF special agents identified multiple firearms which were discovered in the Philadelphia area as having been originally purchased in Georgia. The short time frame between the firearms purchase in Georgia and subsequent recovery in Philadelphia, known as a short, quote, time to crime period, indicated that the weapons may have been trafficked into the city. Police that's a different article. According to the indictment, a subsequent investigation showed that over the course of 6 months, the conspiracy led by defendant Norman allegedly purchased nearly 300 firearms from dealers in and around Atlanta and transported the firearms to Philadelphia for distribution and sale on the black market in exchange for approximately $116,000. And then in the second case, beginning in March 2020, ATF special agents identified multiple firearms which were discovered in Philadelphia as having been originally purchased in South Carolina. Agents subsequently learned about a number of additional firearms recovered in Philadelphia with short time to crime periods that indicated they may have been trafficked into the city, just as in the other case. According to the indictment, the recovered firearms were concentrated in a particular area of Philadelphia and were originally purchased near Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Subsequent investigation showed that defendant Ware had allegedly purchased several of the recovered firearms and conspired and communicated with defendants Hanif Vaughn and Jabril Vaughn and others about the purchase, transportation, and sale on the black market of over 100 illegal firearms. So they keep going on. It's sort of just talking about the process of how they detected this, but this is driving up a lot of the gun crime. And to tell you why I'm really covering this, a lot of times I'll have people in local forums that I watch, and they'll be saying this means that there's an epidemic of gun violence and we have to get tougher on gun laws. Well, maybe you ought to pay attention to the type of people who are committing the crimes and how they got the weapon, okay? If you're seeing people who already have criminal histories, they would not have been able to purchase it legally. There is a form you fill out every time, and it's actually a recipe for disaster if you're prohibited from purchasing and you fill out the form. This is from Birmingham WBRC. Experts say straw purchasing stolen guns are likely contributing to gun crime. While the federal government this week is cracking down on those ghost guns you can buy online, local law enforcement tells us there's another way of getting guns that's creating a much bigger problem in the Birmingham area. Retired ATF agent David Heitch said during his years working in Birmingham and with Birmingham police, most guns used in crimes didn't belong to the shooters. Heitch is the current Calera police chief. The vast majority of the guns we recover are going to be stolen or straw purchased, Heitch said. So both of those are illegal purchases. And this is from a police chief in Alabama. Straw purchasing is when someone legally buys a gun but gives it to someone who isn't legally allowed to carry. Girlfriends and even mothers are buying guns for them at gun stores, Heitch said. They are buying guns for the convicted felon. When they are caught and punished for doing these purchases, the straw purchaser, the penalty is a slap on the wrist. There is no deterrent. Heitch said while they can't stop straw purchasing or guns from being stolen, they can track them down better with gun owners' help. If we don't have our make, model, and serial number recorded, well then, when a criminal uses it in a crime, it can't be traced back to that criminal. It can't be traced at all because nobody has the make, model, and serial number. So those are some things to keep in mind. I said at the beginning that the subway shooter had some sort of religious motivation based on some of the statements he made. This is a story I covered not long ago, I think in the fall, about the rise of the Moors. And this is one of the problems I see with coverage of gun crime, that you have a sensitivity to these organizations and people where they tend to obfuscate on very key points. And here they talk about the rise of the Moors movement as if it arose out of the sovereign citizen movement. It's not really the same thing. The sovereign citizen movement is a group, and it's not really an organized group, but these are people who don't believe in the authority of law enforcement. And they have all sorts of different theories about it, including that the Constitution isn't real and things like that, or that the highest form of authority is the sheriff's office. That's not the same thing as these groups. They believe in sovereign nations that they themselves belong to within the United States based on their black identity. And that's a very different concept. In fact, conflating the two is almost like, calling a bowl of pasta pizza because they're both Italian food. So please keep this in mind that they're obscuring both the purchase method and the real motive behind these crimes, along with the victims, the perpetrator's race, in order to sort of curate how the story is being perceived by the public. That's about it. I hope you have a great week. Please like, share, and subscribe. And I will talk to you later. You can find me on all these other platforms. Here. On Odyssey, Rumble, BitChute, YouTube, Podbean, Gab, Mind, Substack, Telegram, and Getter. And have a great day.